So I was able to finally get my hands on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the newest entry in the Assassin's Creed franchise, and I wanted to finally give my thoughts on the game. This video isn't going to be anything too crazy or too scripted or like a full-on review or anything. This is just going to be kind of my first impressions on the game, and I am roughly 10 hours in, so I feel like I have a pretty good idea of most of the content in the game, and I have also completed the first arc, but again, I'm not going to be going through any of the huge story stuff that I assume is going to be coming a little bit later in the game. This will include light spoilers for the beginning of the game, like I said, so let's get into it. I want to start off with the technical aspects of this game like I usually do in most of my kind of review things. This game, for some reason, standing out to me, has just looked absolutely beautiful so far. I know a lot of the stuff, when they were first revealing stuff with the game, it looked kind of good, but then especially the faces and the rendering with a lot of that stuff just looked absolutely terrible. But in the final build, it looks absolutely beautiful. I am playing on an Xbox Series X, so I am being able to play with the enhanced editions and all that, and a 4K, but just the environments, the lighting, everything I just think looks super good so far. And moving into the story, and more specifically the characters in the story, this is where this game was kind of gonna, I feel like, be make or break for me, because Assassin's Creed, we'll kind of talk about what I've thought about the last previous entries in a couple minutes, but so far I am really liking Eivor, and this is something that I was a little bit worried about, because Assassin's Creed, I feel in the past, has kind of had trouble developing its main characters into something super interesting and super, I guess, relatable. Some characters have done it more than others. I love Edward, I love Ezio, I like parts of Arno, I like Altair, but then you also have your Jacob Frye, you have your, God forbid, Cassandra and Alexios from Odyssey. Just terrible additions like that. But Eivor, he has definitive character traits that I appreciate about him. I love that you actually go back to kind of the older Assassin's Creed games where you play as him as a child, and you get to kind of see where he comes from, see the stuff where his parents are killed, and he's driven away. All that stuff I absolutely loved, and it just really sorely missed from the Assassin's Creed franchise. He actually feels like a character, which again, is a giant change after Odyssey, where just due to the nature of that game and the RPG style of it, you weren't able to play as an actual character. You either chose Alexios or Cassandra, but Cassandra was the only canon option, and especially Alexios, the voice actor just did a terrible job with most of his lines in that game, so it was really rough playing that game for me. But at the beginning of the story for Valhalla, I was really into it. I really loved the relationship between Eivor and his adopted brother Sigurd, and then Sigurd's father, who is also the king. Great performances all around from everyone, especially that continues all the way throughout the game. I'm loving all the performances so far, especially Eivor, who I think something about the way the actor is just delivering all his lines, I really am enjoying, and it keeps it engaging. See, the story so far is just good. I'm loving the stuff with the hidden ones. We'll discuss more about that in a sec. And something that's kind of interesting with this game is the way it's kind of split into these arcs, which previous Assassin's Creed games have kind of had memory sequences that you can complete, and there have been 10 of them, and there's, pretty much chapters that kind of split the game up into more digestible bites. And this game is kind of doing that in a somewhat similar way, but it's more just the arcs are each about something different, which is something pretty new for Assassin's Creed. Some are obviously going to be better than others, and each arc has a different cast of characters, and while I am enjoying this, it is kind of where I hope, or where the game's kind of starting to lose me in parts, because the stuff I was really enjoying in the beginning of the game, like Sigurd and a lot of those elements, and the stuff with taking on Eivor's past and all that, is all kind of completed in the first, little chapter of the game before they even go to England. I just hope that it kind of stays interesting with these arcs, and that all of them come together in a satisfying way. This is kind of my main concern of the game as we go forward, because I am enjoying the gameplay so far, which we'll talk about in a sec, and I am enjoying most of the arcs by themselves, but I still want a satisfying, complete story at the end, and I still want to see more of Sigurd, since we're especially seeing less of him, and more of the characters that are going to be obviously in the arcs. We're seeing less of kind of Ezio's clan, so that is kind of my main concern. We'll just have to see how it goes. And it is weird because part of me wishes that it was more of a focused story, working with Eivor teaming up with the hidden ones to take out targets and gain alliances in England with a smaller cast of characters. But again, I also kind of feel like that goes against what this game is going for, which is a Viking epic made up of characters and clans from all over England that are all going to come together, hopefully in the end, and take out some sort of, member of the, Order of the Ancients. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But just so much better than Odyssey is what I can say so far, because I'm one of those people that I really did not enjoy a lot of what Odyssey did with the gameplay, with the exploration, with the loot, with the story especially. I was not a huge fan of that. So this seems to be going a lot in the right direction, and I really appreciate that. Let's talk about gameplay. This game is obviously in that RPG style that Assassin's Creed has kind of taken over the past few years, starting with Origins and continuing really far into Odyssey. It was kind of weird when it started out because I appreciate Origins mainly for the story and Bayek and the character and a lot of the stuff that they were doing with that game, but I kind of enjoyed it as like a one-off thing that was just different, and I feel like it was a weird, kind of decent blend of, like taking Assassin's Creed and putting some RPG elements into it, and then Odyssey just went way too far in the other direction, making a complete RPG and disregarding any of the assassin elements, so far to the point where you didn't even have a hidden blade, and it was just insanely too far in that direction for me. And this game is kind of a weird mix of both. It still has the RPG elements, but it also tries to work in integral Assassin's Creed elements like social stealth and things like that. And most of the gameplay, at least for me, feels pretty good. The traversal and navigating through the world, it all just feels like good when I do it. That's a weird word to use, obviously very vague, but when I'm playing the game it was weird. Like, even though I instantly turned it on, something about it just felt good. It felt polished, it felt fun, and it was just it's a good feeling game, which is something I was kind of worried about because a lot of the gameplay looked kind of choppy up to this point. I will say parkour, being a huge part of the AC franchise, is kind of a letdown. It's that same system that they've been using since, I believe, Origins. I know Odyssey had it, where you can literally run up any rock, you can run up anything, there's no real thought to it, you just hold the left stick up. There's not something incredibly I guess intricate or really to it like the earlier systems from AC1 and AC2, and it's not really fancy, and it doesn't have the insane animations and just kind of style to it like Unity's had. It's just serviceable. It's fine. One part of the game I did need to get used to at first was combat, and when I started playing AC Valhalla, I was really into everything. I was loving everything the game was throwing at me, and then we got into the combat sequences, and I really was not a fan. It just felt sluggish, it felt way too arcadey, but as time has gone on, I've just gotten used to it a little bit more, especially by I think the 5th hour mark. I was pretty much fine with the gameplay and the combat, and I appreciate it a little bit more. I still need some more time with it to really solidify my opinion, but as of right now, I don't think I love it, but I think, once again, it's fine. It can be fun, and there are some absolutely brutal takedown animations that remind me of earlier Assassin's Creed games that I absolutely loved and made it very fun. However, it also just kind of feels like the combat system of an RPG that's very grindy, and there's also those moments that kind of take me out of the immersion where you're fighting these bosses with giant glowing health bars, and they have giant glowing weapons, and just a lot of stuff like that. Again, it's not too bad though, and like I already mentioned, this is another element where I feel like is a huge improvement over Odyssey in this regard, since there was a lot of stuff that I really didn't enjoy about the gameplay in Odyssey. It was fine, it was a decent game or whatever, it had decent RPG elements, but so much of it just didn't come together as an Assassin's Creed game for me, and this definitely is, without a doubt, much more of an AC game than Odyssey ever was. The other RPG elements are pretty good as well. There's nothing really too crazy here, a pretty typical skill tree where you improve your power level by choosing different perks and that kind of thing. And I also liked how a lot of the gear worked, which is something that RPGs and looter shooters, just by their nature, that I don't love, kind of fall victim to, is that you get 30 different axes that are all interchangeable during combat, and then you have to deal with a plethora of weapons that you don't really need and don't really care about. Gear is a lot more meaningful in this game by the way you obtain it, and there is a much bigger focus on going to the blacksmith in your camp and getting your weapons improved and your gear improved, and it was just handled pretty well. I also thought the abilities were handled reasonably well compared to, once again, Odyssey. While I thought some of the ones in Odyssey were kind of neat, like the Sparta kick and all that stuff, they were kind of fun, they were kind of weird to mess around with. A lot of them I thought were way too over the top, didn't really feel like they belong, and once again just kind of took me out of the immersion. I do enjoy in this game how you actually have to find them by searching out these books of knowledge, and once you synchronize the points, you find these books of knowledge, and then you get these different abilities unlocked, and encourages exploration, which is something that I also think is done pretty well in this game. Just exploring the open world, I've had a ton of moments where I just see something in the distance and I want to go explore it, and that obviously is a huge thing for open world games to nail, and I think this game does it pretty well. I also really enjoy the settlement system, something pretty much new for Assassin's Creed that actually has some substance to it, and there's just, kind of without going into too much detail because there's a bunch to it, but a lot of cool different elements all over the place kind of for the settlement system that I think work pretty well. And let's talk the hidden ones. Obviously, this is an Assassin's Creed game, kind of, although it is in the franchise. It is much more of one, like I said, than Odyssey ever was. I love being introduced to all the elements of the hidden ones, like Haytham, and just being a part of kind of that world again is something that I didn't realize I missed so much, since it really had been since, I guess, Syndicate, since was the last time we had an established Brotherhood, and even Syndicate I don't love, so really Unity and that kind of era of Assassin's Creed was the last time we kind of felt like there was an established brotherhood in the game, and that's something I really appreciated. Learning all the stuff like the leap of faith and being able to practice with the hidden blade is really cool. Social stealth returning is a ton of fun. It actually encourages the moments that feel like Assassin's Creed because you've got your hood up and you're blending into the environment, and I can't say anything other than it feels like Assassin's Creed. However, there were a few moments where I could kind of feel the struggle to embrace these Assassin's Creed elements while still being a Viking RPG, and I know that's something that is super hard to nail, and I just kind of wish we could have a true Assassin's Creed game at this point. And it was sort of weird still having this like Viking RPG where you're doing these epic raids and killing, loads of people. And then there were also the moments where, it was the social stealth, you had to blend in. I do think it was done pretty well, and nevertheless, I appreciate that they were included to at least make it feel like it is an Assassin's Creed game. It's really just the little things for me, like seeing the Assassin's logo again, which we haven't seen, once again, like I said, in years, and the return of things like the confessions when you kill your targets right before they die. That was really cool, and I love the addition of these like super violent Mortal Kombat x-rays that you get when you assassinate people. Those were awesome, and just a really cool addition that I didn't expect at all. Once again, loved playing the Assassin's Creed parts of this game. I just wish there was a bigger focus on it. So in conclusion, I am really liking Assassin's Creed Valhalla so far, much more than I initially thought I would. I hope the combat for me can kind of stay interesting throughout my entire playthrough, and most of all, I hope the story just turns out to be good. I don't need it to be one of the best, I just need Eivor to be a compelling protagonist, and if he could be one of the better ones of the franchise, that would be enough for me, especially, like I said, coming from the RPG-focused games where we haven't had as much of a focus on the protagonist. I really appreciate that. I do like the arc system, I just hope it doesn't make the narrative feel too fractured by the end, and this game does for me feel like a reasonable blend of new and old Assassin's Creed, but there is something that I can't shake in the back of my mind that just feels a little off. So I guess if this were to be the last of the RPG trilogy, of Assassin's Creed games, that's Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, then I would be happy. We would have Assassin's Creed was a super popular franchise. It got way too big. They started cranking them out year by year, and they just got stale. They did something different. They kind of perfected the Assassin's Creed RPG elements. And then if in 2 or 3 years we get a next gen actual Assassin's Creed game set in whatever crusade you wanted to, or whatever time period, with an established brotherhood where you play as someone joining the brotherhood, I think that would be super awesome. And I just would love to get it in the style of, like the Ezio trilogy, but with modern gameplay and modern technical aspects. I think that'd be super interesting, and I also don't really know how they pull it off, but that's just wishful thinking. Either way, I think Valhalla is pretty good and a pretty solid attempt of making an Assassin's Creed game that pleases both camps, but we'll have to see if my opinion changes by the time I finish the game, and from the sounds of what I heard online, that is going to be quite a while, because this game is super long apparently. But that's going to be it. I will probably be talking about Valhalla again at some point. I'm hoping I do an Assassin's Creed game ranking, which is something I've wanted to do for years, and I have beat every single one of the games except Odyssey, so we hopefully in the next few months, by the time I beat Valhalla, I might replay the Ezio games, and then I will have that video out hopefully, but again, that probably won't be for a while. Most of all, I want to know what you guys think of Assassin's Creed Valhalla so far. What do you think of it in comparison to the older games, and how do you think it balances these RPG elements with the Assassin's elements, and what do you think of it as a complete package? Thank you all for watching. Majestic Gaming.